need your assistance this morning, if you would. We're going to play a game. You know this game, and I am quite confident that you can do it. If you do not play my game, you don't get lunch. Like it? Okay, here's how the game works. Simon says, touch your nose. So many of you not getting lunch. Thank you. Simon says, raise your hands. Put your hands down. Oh, come on. Simon says, put your hands down. Good job. She still got her hand on her nose. Simon didn't say stop. She just, good job. You're right. Simon says you can stop. Okay. Thank you so much. We're all very familiar with how this game works, and thank you for playing it. I appreciate it. Simon says, and we do. Came to my mind as I was thinking this week that I can get full-grown adults to do anything. You just preface it by saying, Simon says. It's awesome. But you know what? If I say, Jesus says, I wonder what would happen there. Right? Like if I said, Jesus says, forgive your enemies. Do you know what about 97% of us do? We say, let me analyze that. Now, what exactly did he mean by enemy? And who is out beyond that? And what do I actually mean if I have to love them or forgive them, right? We analyze it. Or if I said, Jesus says that we're called to extravagant giving. And the Old Testament baseline is the 10% tithe. New Testament says that's the base. Extravagance is above and beyond 10% of what we give. Most of us look back at the Lord, and rather than just do it, we debate it. Right? We say that's just for the Old Testament. Clearly, extravagant giving actually means 2%. Jesus says, going into all the nations, make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. And we memorize it. Catch my drift? Simon says it, and we're like, I'm on this. I'll hold my nose until Simon says I can quit. Jesus says, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm guilty. I analyze, I debate, I memorize. I don't always just do. Last week we started looking at the signs and the sayings that show up in John's Gospel, right? John's Gospel is divided into 7 signs. And we talked last week about how the point of the sign is not to stand next to it and take our photo and say, isn't this nice? I found a sign. Right? But to follow the sign. To follow it to who Jesus is. Every one of those signs is about saying, what would the next step be? What would happen if I go a little deeper? I pursue a little bit more intimacy with Jesus Christ. And then eventually we'll start getting to the 7 sayings, those I am sayings, where Jesus just flat out says, you don't even have to follow the sign. I'll tell you what you would find if you come to me. And today's second sign, friends, I think it's about Jesus says. It's about the power of Jesus' word, and it's frankly about the question of whether or not we believe that his word is more important than science. And we'll do what it is that he calls us to do. So Janet already read this for us. If Bibles aren't open, I'd encourage you to open them to John chapter 4. The stage gets set for us in verse 46. Last week we were in John 2, and Jesus was in Cana of Galilee, right? That's where he turned the water into wine, and he put that sign that says to us, if he's here, the kingdom is here, and that in his kingdom there is astounding purification and abundant joy. Well, second half of chapter 2 and chapter 3, he goes down to Jerusalem. When we pick up here in chapter 4, he's back in Cana of Galilee. He's back where he's turned the water into wine. And rumor has got out that Jesus is in town. And crowds of people have come. One of those people is a daddy. He's a daddy who lives actually in a town called Capernaum. Capernaum is about 14 miles away from Cana in Galilee. And that daddy's son is dying. And he hears that Jesus is there, that he's present, he's within a day's journey, so he hoofs it, right? He goes all the way from Cana in Galilee, Capernaum, which is about 700 feet below sea level, all the way up to Cana in Galilee, which is way above sea level. So that'd be 14 miles uphill, right? Goes all the way to get to Jesus because he knows, if Jesus would just touch my son can be healed. We pick up in verse 48. Hear Jesus making this kind of strange statement. It's a statement made not just to the dad. Actually, I'm not even sure it's even made to the dad, but to the group of people that are there. He says, unless you all see miraculous signs and wonders, you will never believe. Well, we're going to discover in this passage that believe gets used over and over again. So I have to ask the question, believe what? I mean, this dad walked 14 miles to get to Jesus. He believes Jesus can heal. That's not the question on the table. He doesn't need to see the miraculous sign. He already believes or he wouldn't have come. I think Jesus wants to go a little deeper than that. I wonder if what Jesus means is, unless you people see the signs, unless you see the wonders, you'll never believe that the word of the word is enough. You know what I mean? The word of the word is all we need. John opened his gospel in John chapter 1 and saying that in the beginning, right? He's taking us all the way back to Genesis. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Indeed, the Word was God, and he was with God in the beginning. You know, if you went all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, you learned this in Sunday school. Some Sunday school teacher made you color pictures about it. In the beginning, God spoke, and it was. He spoke light. He commanded creation into existence, and it came. In the beginning, the word of the word was enough. In the beginning, God spoke the endocrine system in your body into existence. He described gravity, and it came about. In the beginning, with one word, he created the platypus. I don't know why. But he spoke it, and it was. When Jesus looks at the people, he looks at this man, I wonder if in the back of his mind he's going, unless you see the signs, you're never going to believe. You're never going to believe that the word of the word is still enough. Now, this daddy looks back at Jesus and he misunderstands, I think, what Jesus meant. He says, I believe. Just come with me. Come to Capernaum, touch my son, and he will be healed. And Jesus looks at this man and he loves him. Same way as he looks at you and me. He loves him enough to say, come one more step closer. So Jesus kind of pounds a sign into the ground. See, I don't think that the sign is the son being healed. I think the sign is the statement Jesus makes to the man. Because this man has it in his mind that the word isn't enough. He needs Jesus to come and touch him. He needs him to show up. Come with me this 14 miles. If you show up and you whisper some incantation or you do mumbo jumbo over my boy, he'll live. But Jesus looks back at him, right? And in verse 50, he says this, go, your son will live. Now the NIV version I'm reading from says something very nice and polite, like, you can go. It's all right. You can head on down. He's alive. What the Greek says is one word and there's an exclamation point behind it. It says, go. Where I'm from, it was when your mama went, get to getting. Some of you know what that means. Okay, good. That means book it right now. Jesus looks at the Father and he says, you go. He gives him a command. A command that, frankly, to the dad had to be counterintuitive. A command that wasn't what he expected, that if he sat down with somebody else, they would have said to him, well, that was stupid. Why'd you go and not take Jesus? He gives him a command, but he also gives him a promise, right? He says, go. Your son's going to live. As a matter of fact, you could translate it, your son lives. Like it's a done deal. I spoke it. It's done. Get to get. Now, if that man, if this daddy had looked back at Jesus and he saw the sign. The sign said, the word of the word is enough. The sign said that if Jesus spoke this promise, it's true, it's accomplished, it's done. The sign said if Jesus commanded it, then his command is good. And you don't need to analyze it, debate it, question it. Good grief, don't memorize it. Just go. If the man had looked back at Jesus and said, I totally believe you. I believe that the word of the word is enough. But come, then I would know he didn't actually believe. Wouldn't you? The second half of verse 50 says, in the NIV, it says, the man took Jesus at his word and he departed. The Greek says, the man believed Jesus' word and he went. That's how I know he believed. See, we get to watch this cool progression. The man walks all the way to Jesus. He goes the 14 miles believing, I believe you're a healer. But now something's starting to shift. There's this change in his mind that begins to say, I believe your word is enough. And if you said this promise, it's true. If you issued this command, it's worth following. And I know he believed it because his life reflected it. See, that's what belief's about, right? If I say Simon says touch your nose, and you touch your nose, then you believe Simon, who is Simon? That he is powerful enough to bother you if you don't touch your nose. If Jesus says, go, and it just doesn't make any sense, when I go, I'm indicating I actually believe his word is enough. I don't need an explanation. I don't need verification. Dad had none. I don't need to analyze it, memorize it, debate it. I don't have to understand it in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. English will work. If he said it, it's enough. Where's Bruce at? There he is. He's been telling me lately when I point at somebody, he's got 3 fingers pointing back. I think I got 5. Looks more like that. As I was preaching preaching it. As I was praying through this and getting ready this week, in the rest of my life, I was reading the Bible. I start in Genesis, I go to Revelation. I'm real creative. I repeat ad nauseum. Normally, I read about 3 chapters a day. I read the whole 3 chapters, I take one thing out, but I go, oh, thanks for that. That's a great word, Jesus. And then I move along. This week, though, I've been in the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5, 6, and 7. I've been there all week. I'm still not out of it. Because every time I open it, I hear the Lord saying to me, hey, Kelly, the word of the word, is it enough? And then I groan. The Lord's Prayer is found in Matthew chapter 6. You know it, right? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. As you keep reading in there, Jesus commands us to pray. He says, pray, give us this day our daily bread. I was reading that earlier this week, and I just felt the Lord pointing all those fingers back at me. And he's going, hey, Kelly, is the word of the word enough? Is it enough that I have given you a command? Command 1. I have to ask for my daily bread every day. I don't like doing that. I like looking at my bank account and saying, I'm good, thanks. Every day I'm supposed to come before my God and say, everything I have is from you. That's command number 1. I think as I was praying about it, the Lord said, oh, there's another command. Don't think you're done. Cool. Give us this day our daily bread. Doesn't that imply that if God gives me more than my daily bread, it is not my job to hoard it until that bread becomes moldy? It is my job to find somebody who doesn't have daily bread and take my excess and give to them? I don't really care for that. I think that's counterintuitive. I would like a much bigger bread basket. I would like him to give me the bakery. And once I have the whole bakery, you may have a little. That's not what that says. There's also a promise in that command, isn't there? There's a promise that my Father is going to meet my daily needs. He will do it. Now the question becomes, do I believe that the word of the word is enough? Is it enough that Jesus said, I'm to pray it, I need only what is for this day, and that I need to trust that my Father will take care of it? If it's enough, then it's going to start to change the way I look at my finances. It means that when I go to write the tithe check and it pinches, it's okay. It means that when I realize somebody around me has a need, even though I could forever look at my savings account and say, but, that I get to trust the Father if He's asked me to give, that He's going to take care of me. You'll know when I believe that statement by how I handle my checkbook. You're going to keep reading in the Lord's Prayer. And you get to the part that says, forgive us our debts, right? The debt that we owe the Lord, as we have forgiven those who are our debtors. You know there's a command in that, right? It's pretty straightforward. I have to forgive those who owe me a debt. That's the command. Matter of fact, Jesus goes on further down and He says that if I do not forgive, I won't be forgiven. And how could I be? I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's the old preacher joke trick, that Jesus forgave me this much, right? When He hung on the cross, He forgave absolutely everything. He's paid a debt for every sin I've ever committed. For me to forgive you, I'm forgiving you about this much. No matter what you've done. If I believe that I am the most forgiving person in the whole world, then I'll forgive you. And I'll hold on to the promise too. Because inherent in that command is the promise that I am forgiven. That every debt has been washed clean. Like it's gone. And the Lord's never going to hold it over my head. So I can stop doing that. If I believe it, you'll see me stop walking around carrying grudges. If I believe it, you'll see me stop picking up the phone to tell the entire world about somebody else's debt they owe me. If I believe this, I'll stop living like I'm the one person who can't be forgiven. If the word of the word is enough, then I go. Even if it seems counterintuitive. Does that make sense? I think that Jesus put that sign there for the dad. The same reason that He puts a sign there for you and I. Because the truth of the matter is that man could have stayed there with Jesus and he could have said, I believe you're a healer, but I'm not sure I believe that your word is enough. But to miss that, friends, is to miss knowing how good your Savior is. The life of being a Christian is the life of following this sign. It's the life of saying, okay, God, I believe the word of the word is enough. Now, don't get me wrong. That's often a lifetime of saying, I believe it for today. You're going to have to remind me again tomorrow. It's a lifetime of saying, I forgive this person, and probably having to learn it again for this person. But it's a lifetime of being able to say, Jesus, I believe your word. It's enough. See, the truth of the matter is that the one who was speaking the word to the Father was the one who loved his Son even more than that dad did. The one speaking the word was the one who had the power to speak life, to speak hope, to speak joy, to speak anything. Man, why do you listen to Simon and not to this guy? Sometimes people tell me, Pastor, I don't know what the word of the word is. I have good news. It is here. Did you know that 98% of God's will for your life is here? Things that are missing. The exact name of your spouse. The precise job you should get. Your zip code. Characteristics of what your spouse should look like, that would be in here. Ways to take your job, I don't care what it is, and use it for the glory of God. That's in here too. How to interact with those in your zip code, and sometimes even the challenge to change them. Oh, that would be in here too. 98% of it. Right here. But the question, Christian, is, do you believe it? When you read God's word, do you believe that the word of the word is enough? That what He's desiring to do when He speaks a command that doesn't make any sense is to make you look like Him. And when he speaks a promise, what he wants to do is have you know he means it. Do you know how you come to believe that the word of the word is enough? You do what the word says. You realize there's no other way, right? My guess is that when that dad looked at Jesus and he said, okay, your word is enough. If you said go, I go. If you said my son is healed, then I believe he's healed. I bet he started that 14-mile journey that would have taken him all the way through to the next day. And he spent the whole time going, was this stupid? Why did I do this? Did I really get the command right? Should I have obeyed it? Is Jesus trustworthy? I think he spent 14 miles second guessing because he's a human being. Do you know what? You only need enough belief to go. That's it. It's okay if you spend the entire time that you're obeying going, this doesn't make a lick of sense. Just go. Because you know what happens when you do? That's when you get to come to know who Jesus is. You know, the scripture writer goes on, John tells us in verse 51 that while he was still on his way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said the fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour. And about that point, the dad's eyes bugged out, right? And his little brain exploded. Because the next verse says that he realized that was the exact moment when the word had spoken. You know, when the man stood there next to Jesus, friends, I think he believed a little bit. He believed a little. If you spoke it, I obeyed it. If you promised it, it's true. But it was when he got there and he found out that he had gone and Jesus had in fact done what Jesus said he was going to do, that he went from believing in his head to believing in his gut. For the rest of his life, this dad had a story. For the rest of his life, he could say, I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that when Jesus speaks a promise, he keeps it. And he could say, let me tell you about my son. For the whole rest of his life, he came to know in a brand new way. As a matter of fact, John finishes the phrase out. And he says at the end of 53, so the man and all of his household believed. It is an amazing progression we get to watch. First, he believes Jesus probably can heal. It's worth the trip, at least. Then he starts to believe that Jesus might just mean what he says, and that the word of the word might be enough. And by the end of this passage, he believes beyond the shadow of a doubt, so much so that his whole household becomes believers. Because this man can look back at them and say, listen, I don't know because I read it somewhere. I know because I lived it. And I watched what Jesus could do. I believe that the invitation that God gives to every one of us is to stand at this sign every day and say, Jesus, is your word going to be enough for me? Is your word going to be enough that I will obey? If you said it, I do it. If you promised it, I trust it. When we follow this sign, and don't just say, oh yeah, I believe, but actually live it out, that's when we get to come to know God by experience. You know, I know that my Father is a God who provides because I believe that the word of the word is enough. And when he's asked me to go further out financially than I really wanted to, I got to watch him provide. I know that my God's a healer because when I pursued inner healing, he did it. I know that my God can reconcile people who ought not to have nothing to do with each other. Because when he called me to forgive my enemies, he brought us together. God always keeps his word. And the question for us today is, do we believe it's enough? You know, maybe the simplest thing you could do is open your Bibles to Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And take one word at a time. Jesus, do I believe you? Do I believe this command? Then show me how to live it. Do I believe this promise? Then how do I live in light of it? Because the word of the word, it really is